Hello audience, Mr. Z here, and boy oh boy do we have an exciting scenario for you today. Exciting alternate history scenario for you. What if Britain became communist? I've done my research and I found that we can go about this scenario one of two ways. The easy way, or the fun way. So without further ado, let's get right into things. We'll be kicking things off in the Victorian era, an age defined by the Industrial Revolution, the rise of robber barons, and Karl Marx. Marx often claimed that communism ought to arise in an industrialized nation, something that neither Russia nor China really had going for them at the time they became communist, but Britain did. So, we can check that right off the list. Marx also appealed to the working class, specifically calling out the unethical practices the upper class used to obtain their wealth, something most workers in Victorian England would agree with. Another check on that list. Finally, a hefty sum of Marx's work was specifically published in London, so with all those pieces in play, why didn't some major communist faction make a grab for power? Well, to put it simply, there was no motivation to. While conditions may have been bad, they were never too terrible. The people felt they had some say in the democratic process, unlike in Russia. The aristocracy was fairly respected, unlike in Russia, and the status quo was better than the revolutionary alternative, unlike in Russia. But let's change all that. How can we upset the British working class, smear the aristocracy, and destroy the people's trust in the establishment all in one go? I'm glad you asked. Let me introduce you to Prince Albert Victor, Duke of Clarence and Avondale, the grandson of Queen Victoria, and second in line to the throne. So what's so significant about Prince Albert? Well, aside from being a figure whose intellect and mental health were a hot topic of debate, he was also one of the potential suspects for the Jack the Ripper murders. Though today it's well established that he couldn't have been Jack the Ripper on account of him being away from London at the time. Had this would-be king been Jack the Ripper, well, that changes things. November 9th, 1888, a 25-year-old Mary Jane Kelly, who was meant to be the last of Jack the Ripper's victims, has turned the tables on her assailant and escapes to a constable who promptly arrests Albert. Shock would erupt throughout England as the Queen's grandson is exposed as a brutal murderer, tarnishing the public's respect for the aristocracy and gaining nationwide attention for his trial. The public were calling for the death penalty. Many were disgusted by the circumstances and twisted the narrative into one of the ruling class butchering those below them, leading small socialist and Marxist parties to further their narratives of the oppressive aristocracy. Things would build up until a final verdict was decided, and Prince Albert was found innocent on account of insanity. To the Queen, this was her way of keeping her grandson safe, while also keeping him away from the public where he might endanger others. However, to the public, this was spun into a tale of nepotism and special privileges for the rich, while they continued to trample on the poor. Protests calling for justice would escalate into riots targeting wealthy districts of London. Arson, destruction of private property, and assault would be reported all across the city, leading the government to send in armed soldiers to quell the riots. However, with tensions exponentially escalating, soldiers would be forced to fire upon rioters. This would be the flame of motivation needed to ignite the powder keg of revolution. Similar events would spring up all across the country, eventually culminating in a full-on civil war, ending with a march upon Westminster and a sieging of Buckingham Palace. These bloody and violent years would destabilize the United Kingdom and send shockwaves throughout the world, with the royal family likely fleeing to Canada, while the other commonwealths take the opportunity to exercise further independence. The impact of this would also resonate throughout Europe, potentially giving the Red Scare an early jumpstart, and leaving Germany as the leading European empire. The implications of this on World War I seem fairly straightforward, as it's unlikely communist Britain would enter the war, let alone go to war over an alliance the former government had established with Belgium. Thus, neither Britain nor the US enter the war, as it's unlikely the US would do trade with communist Britain and therefore would never experience interference with Germany's unrestricted submarine warfare, meaning a victory for the Central Powers, and a scenario which may end up somewhat similar to Kaiserreich. But as with all of these, there are many ways the scenario could have gone, so if you have another idea of how this could have panned out, be sure to let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Thank you all for watching. Be sure to like the video if you enjoyed it and subscribe for more. Mr. Z, out.